Operation video for the RT-800B series crane. This video is intended to serve as a guideline to follow for proper maintenance and operation of the crane. It covers lubrication points and fill recommendations as stated on the lubrication chart in the service manual of the crane. Additionally, this video covers the various gauges and controls provided for proper operation and functioning of the crane. This video is only intended to familiarize the crane operator with the operating controls and functions. It does not replace common sense or good sound judgment while operating the crane. The RT-800B series is available in either a 55-ton or 65-ton capacity rating. The outriggers feature single-stage, double-box, telescopic beams with inverted stabilizer cylinders. The RT-800B series has a 4-section trapezoidal full-powered boom. The first thing the operator should do before operating is to perform a walk-around inspection of the crane, looking for obvious damage and oil leaks. Obvious damage could be cable kinked or broken wires, latches on hook blocks, or headache balls that are damaged or missing, or outrigger pads that are damaged or bent. The cab on the RT-800B series is mounted on the superstructure and rotates with the superstructure. All crane and travel functions can be controlled from the operator's cab. On the console, there are various dials and gauges that need to be monitored during operation. Functions are controlled by foot pedals and controllers on the armrests of the seat. The controller farthest to the left is used to swing the superstructure. By pulling the swing controller rearward, the superstructure will swing to the left. By pushing the swing controller forward, the superstructure will swing to the right. The controller to the right of the swing controller is the auxiliary hoist controller. By pushing it forward, the cable will spool off the drum, lowering the load. By pulling on that controller, the hoist drum will wind the cable onto the drum, raising the load. The next controller to the right of the operator's seat is for the boom lift cylinder. Pushing the controller will retract the lift cylinder, causing the boom to lower. Pulling the controller will extend the lift cylinder, raising the boom. The controller farthest to the right is for the main hoist. By pushing it forward, the cable will spool off the drum, lowering the load. By pulling on the controller, the hoist drum will wind the cable onto the drum, raising the load. Located in the center of the handle is an electronic hoist drum rotation indicator, which can be felt as it pulsates against your thumb. When the drum rotates, this feeling assists the operator in determining hoist motion. We will now look at the various gauges, indicator lights, and switches that enable monitoring and selecting different craning functions. Starting on the left side top is the left turn signal indicator light. Next is the outrigger selector panel. Below is the crane function power switch. To the right is the cold start switch. Located on the bottom left is the rear steer control switch. And to the right is the swing brake control toggle switch. To the right of the outrigger selector panel is the tachometer hour meter. Below are the voltmeter, fuel, engine coolant, and engine oil pressure gauges. Below the gauges are the windshield wiper washer switch, headlight switch, and the park brake control switch. Next is the rear steer indicator, the transmission oil temperature gauges, and the optional high-speed glide toggle switch. Directly above the steering wheel is the LCD display panel. The steering column is both telescopic and can be tilted. Located in the center of the steering wheel is the horn button. To the right of the steering wheel is the dual air pressure gauge. Next is the differential lock control switch. Directly below is the 2- and 4-wheel range selector switch. The crane must be at a complete stop when selecting either of these two switches. To the right is the transmission shift lever. Below is the ignition switch and the outrigger extension and retraction switch. Starting on the left is the model DS350 GW-PAT load moment indicator console. The PAT LMI aids the crane operator by providing information regarding boom length, boom angle, tip height, working radius, rated load, and total calculated weight being lifted. Parts of line or falls and the appropriate load chart can be easily programmed into the console. If non-permitted conditions such as maximum load or two blocking are approached, the load moment indicator will warn the operator by sounding an audible alarm, lighting a warning light, and locking out the control levers which activate hoist up, telescope out, and boom down. The LMI is an operator aid and is not a substitute for good operator judgment, experience, and use of accepted safe crane operating procedures. Safe operation of the crane is the responsibility of the operator, who must ensure that all warnings and instructions supplied are fully understood and observed. The last light is the right turn signal indicator. To the extreme right of the console are the pin-type swing lock and hand throttle lock controls and the level bubble indicator. Located above the controls is the cup holder and ashtray. Below the cup holder is the heater control panel. The knob at the top is used to control heater temperature. Below is the heater fan speed switch. Next is the heater fan switch. Below the fan switch is the air control lever. Next is the airflow control lever. Below the heater control panel is the optional rear axle oscillation override toggle switch. To the right is the optional outer mid and inner mid pinning switches, along with engaged and disengaged indicator lights. To the right of the right side armrest is the lever used to engage and disengage the 360-degree swing lock. Located above the right side sliding window are more switches. From left to right they are the skylight wiper washer knob, boom floodlight on-off switch, cab work light, and the optional beacon light switch. Beside the beacon light switch is the interior light. The booklet containing the crane's load capacity charts is stowed in the right rear corner of the operator's cab. The booklet contains a number of different load charts for use with various crane configurations. To the left of the operator's seat is the dry chemical fire extinguisher. Behind the fire extinguisher, under 2-dot plugs, are located 2 fluid bottles. The first one is for the windshield washers, and the one to the rear is for the skylight washers. Located on the end of the right armrest are several knobs, switches, and buttons. The round knob is used to adjust the armrest travel for operator's comfort. On the front of the right armrest is a button that can be used to sound a horn. The horn can be used by the operator as a swing horn to provide a warning that the superstructure is about to be rotated. The toggle switch to the left is the main hoist speed selector switch. It is a two-position switch labeled high and low that operates a solenoid-controlled valve on the main hoist to allow the operator to select high or low main hoist line speeds. The switch located to the right is used to activate a solenoid which engages another pump section to provide hoist boost for more hydraulic flow and power to the hoist. Now let's move to the left armrest. This armrest is also adjustable for the operator's comfort. The button in the armrest is provided to enable the operator to grease the turntable bearing. Pushing the button activates the bearing greaser pump. The toggle switch to the left is the auxiliary hoist speed selector switch. It is a two-position toggle switch labeled high and low. The switch operates a solenoid control valve on the auxiliary hoist, which measures the flow of oil to the hoist motors. The last toggle switch is the auxiliary hoist on-off switch. This switch can be used to turn off the auxiliary hoist controller. A sunscreen is provided to reduce sunlight and glare through the skylight. When the sunscreen is not being used, it can be stowed to the rear of the skylight. The operator can position the sunscreen to suit different conditions. Located on the cab floor are a number of pedals. From left to right, they are the swing brake, telescope, service brake, and the foot throttle. First, the RT800B series cranes are equipped with the rear axle oscillation lockout to hold the axle from pivoting under certain conditions. Second, the rear axle is bolted to a fifth wheel or cradle, which is pinned to the frame in the center, allowing it to pivot left and right. Third, to check the oscillation lockout for proper functioning, first assure the tires are inflated to recommended inflation pressure. Then, with the unloaded, fully retracted boom centered over the front and elevated to no more than a 10 to 15 degree boom angle, position the crane on a block or curb so that one rear tire is approximately 6 inches to 12 inches off the surface. Slowly and carefully swing the superstructure and boom to the right or left until the axle oscillation lockout valve is activated to lock the rear axle out of level. Do not swing beyond the tire track. After engaging the swing lock, slowly drive off the block or curb and stop. The rear tires should both be touching the surface, and the opposite front tire should be light or may come off the surface. Release the swing lock and slowly swing the superstructure until it is centered over the front. If the axle oscillation lockout system is functioning properly, the crane will re-level itself. If the rear axle does not lock or unlock properly, stop. Evaluate the lockout system and repair as necessary. This concludes Part 1, Operations, for the Grove RT855B, RT865B Rough Terrain Crane. For further instructions, refer to the Operators and Safety Manual located in the crane cab, or contact your local authorized Grove distributor. Maintenance video for the RT800B series crane. Following the designated lubrication procedures is important to assure maximum crane life. Refer to the Operators and Safety Handbook for all the lubrication points, frequency of lubrication, and types of lubricants to be used. This video is intended to familiarize the mechanic with the various lubrication points and fill levels of the RT800B series. It does not replace the lubrication section in the Operator's and Safety Handbook. We will be starting at the boom nose and working our way to the rear of the crane. The auxiliary boom nose has one grease zerk that should be greased every 500 hours until the grease extrudes. The hook block sheaves have one grease zerk per sheave that should be greased every 500 hours until the grease extrudes. The hook block swivel bearing has 3 grease zerks that should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. The hook shank and hex nut should be greased every 500 hours. Apply a liberal coating of grease to the shank threads and the top of the nut to prevent dust and water from entering the threads. The lower boom nose sheaves should be greased every 500 hours. Each sheave has one grease zerk. Grease should be applied until it extrudes. The upper boom nose sheaves have one grease zerk per sheave that should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. The boom section lower wear pads should be greased every 500 hours. This is done by fully extending the boom and applying grease with a brush to the bottom rails of all boom sections. Then the boom is retracted to apply the grease to the pads. The boom section upper wear pads should be greased every 500 hours. There are a total of 6 grease zerks, 3 on each side. Thoroughly coat the wear pad contact area. The boom's retract and extend cable sheave should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. The boom sections must be extended to gain entry through the access holes in the boom. There are a total of 3 grease zerks. The telescope cylinder wear pads should be greased every 500 hours. The boom section must be extended to gain entry through the access holes in the boom. Thoroughly coat the wear pad contact area with a brush. On the left side of the boom is the boom extension alignment device. The adjustment bar, which is located on the fly section, has one grease zerk that should be greased as needed until grease extrudes. On the base section is the push bar. The bar's contact area should be thoroughly coated with grease. On the bottom of the base boom section and the inner mid-boom section are boom latching pins. There is one grease zerk on each latching pin that should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. The upper lift cylinder shaft has one grease zerk. It should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. When greasing the lift cylinder pivot shaft, better distribution of grease within the shaft is obtained if the weight of the boom is removed from the shaft. The lower lift cylinder shaft has one grease zerk. It should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. When greasing the lower shaft, better distribution of grease within the shaft is obtained if the weight of the boom is removed from the shaft. The rear boom pivot shaft has 2 grease zerks, one at each end. The shaft should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. When greasing the rear pivot shaft, better distribution of grease within the shaft is obtained if the weight of the boom is removed from the shaft. Now let's look at the different lubrication points located on the boom extension. Located on top of the swing-away is a single sheave assembly that has one grease zerk. It should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. The swing-away rollers located on the inside bottom have one grease zerk per roller that should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. The swing-away wear pads located at the end should be greased every 500 hours. Thoroughly grease the wear pad contact area on both sides of the swing-away. On the end of the swing-away is a one-shiv assembly. There is one grease zerk that should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. The swing gearbox is lubricated with 90W or 85W 140 gear lube. When checking the swing gearbox oil level, place the dipstick into the sleeve until the cap is flush with the end of the sleeve. Do not screw the cap onto the sleeve to check the level. The gearbox should be checked every 500 hours and filled to the mark on the dipstick. On the bottom of the gearbox is a pinion gear bearing. There is one grease zerk that should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. Located on top of the gearbox is the swing brake. The swing brake is lubricated with hydraulic oil and should be checked every 500 hours by removing the plug located on the side of the brake. The swing bearing is greased by two grease zerks located on a panel in front of the turntable. The bearing should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes from the whole circumference of the bearing. An option is available for a push button on the armrest of the turntable for greasing. The superstructure must be rotated while greasing the bearing to assure even distribution of grease. The swing gear and pinion should be greased every 500 hours. This is done by brushing grease on the bearing teeth. Located on the swivel barrel are two grease zerks that should be greased every 500 hours. Each fitting requires approximately 1 ounce, or 28 grams, of water pump grease. The Grove Model HO30 hoist planetaries are lubricated with 90W or 85W 140 gear lube. They should be checked every 500 hours by removing the plug at the left rear of the hoist. This is the fill and check port. The cable follower and idler assembly on the hoist should be greased every 500 hours. Each follower and idler has a grease zerk on each side, which should be filled until grease extrudes. Now we will take a look at the lubrication areas on the frame. Each pinhole hook, front and rear, has 3 grease zerks that should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. Fully extend outrigger beams and stabilizers to apply grease to the bottom of the beams and stabilizers barrels. All beams and stabilizers should be greased every 500 hours using a brush. To check the lubrication level for the planetary axle ends, position the crane on a firm, level surface. Set the crane up on outriggers, release the parking brake, and shut the engine off. The planetaries are filled with 85W 140 or 90W gear lube. They should be checked every 500 hours of operation. Fill to the bottom of the level hole in the housing with the fill plug horizontal. The hydraulic reservoir. The reservoir holds 200 gallons of Kendall-Hyken 052 hydraulic oil. The hydraulic oil filter should be checked daily with the hydraulic oil at normal operating temperature, approximately 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Shown here is the change filter sight gauge. When the filter located in the reservoir becomes restricted, this will force the white set of ears down into the red, indicating the filter is clogged. Located on the top left side of the engine hood under a door is the engine crankcase dipstick. The engine is normally filled with 15W40 engine oil. The engine oil should be checked daily. There are 2 axle oscillation lockout cylinders. one on each side of the frame. Each cylinder has a grease zerk on each end of each cylinder. They should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. Trunnion bearings on the axles each have 2 grease zerks, upper and lower, on each end of the axles. They should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. To properly lubricate cardan joints, the machine should be set up on outriggers with the tires off the ground and the parking brake released. This will allow the wheels to be rotated until the grease zerks are aligned with the access holes in the axle housings. Apply grease until it extrudes every 500 hours. Located on the top rear of the radiator is a sight level gauge for engine coolant level. The radiator is filled with 50% water and 50% antifreeze coolant. The coolant should be checked daily. Now let's go under the machine and finish the lubrication. We will start at the rear and work our way forward. On the bottom of the radiator is a petcock to drain the engine coolant. The radiator holds 48 quarts. To lubricate the fifth wheel oscillation bushings, grease the 2 grease zerks on the fifth wheel pins every 500 hours until grease extrudes. Each axle has 2 steer cylinders. There is 1 grease zerk on each end of the steer cylinders that should be greased every 500 hours until grease extrudes. Each axle differential is lubricated with EPGL 85 140 weight lube. Level should be checked every 500 hours of operation. Fill to the bottom of the hole in the housing on the steer cylinder side. The drive lines and universal joints are permanently lubed and require no lubrication. Located on the left side of the frame below the operator's cab is the dipstick and fill tube for the transmission. The transmission is filled with automatic transmission fluid. Check daily with the engine running at 500 to 600 RPM and oil at 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit with the transmission in neutral and the parking brake applied. When checking the transmission oil level, the oil temperature must be stabilized at 180 degrees to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 82.2 degrees to 93.3 degrees Celsius. Do not attempt an oil level check with cold oil. To bring the oil temperature to the proper temperature range, it is necessary either to work the crane or stall the converter. Converter stall can be accomplished by engaging the shift levers in forward and high range with the brakes applied, and then accelerating the engine to half or 3/4 throttle until the desired converter temperature is reached and stabilized. Caution must be used as full throttle stall speeds for an excessive length of time will overheat the converter and cause serious damage. This concludes Part 2, Maintenance Procedures for the Grove RT-855B, RT-865B Rough Terrain Crane. For further instructions, refer to the Maintenance and Inspection Manual and the Service Manual or contact your local authorized Grove distributor.